I'm Miyah and I would like to welcome you to the latest episode of my blog series. So far, I have been able to share my own experiences on what it's like for me to live with Asperger syndrome. A second area includes providing tips and advice to those of you who are on the autism spectrum. And I like to speak with family members, educators, advocates, peers, mentors, employers, professionals, and anybody in the community. And finally, I will cover topics on things that I'm passionate about that are not autism related. Now, before I dive into today's topic, I have two things to mention. So first and foremost, this is a video by Danny, who is one of the co-directors of, or co-founders of Asperger Experts, and his video is all about why someone with Asperger syndrome is so addicted to video games. And finally, I would recommend that you guys check out my written blogs on WordPress.com. That's helloworld240.wordpress.com, helloworld240.wordpress.com. And what I would like to do now is do a combination of giving tips and advice to those of you who are on the autism spectrum, in addition to other people outside of that. And I'd also like to share my own experiences as well. So what I would like to do is talk about the unwritten rules of society and the unwritten rules of communication. And usually unwritten rules are very subtle hints that a neurotypical can usually read between the lines. And we do not read between the lines very well, and we have trouble distinguishing what an unwritten rule is. And an unwritten rule can be anything like a hint, to a comment, to an action, and it can, these rules are just not always so pleasant. And what I would like to do is share an example of that by talking about passive-aggressive behavior. Now, what exactly is passive-aggressive behavior? So, it can be or mean that you might not be amused or impressed with something, but you go along with it anyway, or you drop little hints that you aren't interested, but you pretend to deliver your comments or your actions in a pleasant manner. And what I would like to do is talk about some of these unwritten rules, because I think it's very important, and because I consider passive-aggressive behavior as an unwritten rule. And I wanted to start by naming off some situations. So one of the biggest forms of passive-aggressive behavior is procrastination. And that means that you can blow somebody off easily and you can lead them around without actually telling them the truth. And this can be in a job, this can be in a relationship, this can be when you do business with somebody, anything. And one great example of that was when I was 18 years old. I had attempted to reconnect with a close childhood friend who I had a falling out with 3 years earlier. And they were dropping hints here and there. And one of the biggest ones was that they were dropping procrastination with me. And some of the things that I noticed is whenever I would call her on the phone, she would talk to me for a few minutes, and then I would get some line like, can you call me back in the next 15 minutes? I have to go wash the dishes. And then I would call back, just like she said, and I would get the same thing. Well, can you call me back in the next 15 minutes? I'm going to go curl my hair. And then I would do it again, and one of her family members would pick up the phone, and she supposedly wasn't there. And so that's one form of passive-aggressive behavior. A second type of passive-aggressive behavior is when you get together with somebody and they spend more time looking at their phone or talking on the phone or spending time on their computers, whatever. And they pay very little attention to you. So when I had reconnected with my childhood friend, I had gone over to spend the night, and she was more interested in wanting to call other guys up on the phone in addition to paying attention to another friend that was over there. And so that's another form of passive-aggressive behavior. And then before I had gotten my job at the Center for Leadership and Disability on campus at Georgia State, I was offered a position at a kids salon, and I was supposed to be a party planner. However, the person who was going to work with me very quickly discovered that she didn't really know how to work with Asperger syndrome. And rather than telling me no, she dropped several hints. So first and foremost, every time I would walk in the store, she would either call her friends up on the phone and talk the entire time I was there, or she would spend time with other people when they were in the salon. And finally, some of the other hints that she dropped with me were she sent text messages to me, and again, she procrastinated with, we're not meeting today, thank you. And then she would tell me, well, we'll get together tomorrow and do it. And then I would get the same song and dance. So those are some good examples of passive-aggressive behavior. Another one that I learned, which surprises me, is a form of passive-aggressive behavior, is when you go to do something that makes somebody else envious of you, and you're not necessarily doing it on purpose. You're doing it because you're making choices for you, not for the other person. But the other people in your life or feel jealous of you because you have some feature that they want. And like, let's say that I had long hair and I cut it all off to the length I have now. And I was at a party and they happened to notice my haircut, and rather than saying something like, oh, that's such a pretty look on you, I'm so glad you can pull that look off, they will drop something such as, you know, you looked really pretty with long hair. It would have been better for you to keep it long and then put it up in a bun, or you should have worn it in a bob, not in a pixie. That's an example that is very passive-aggressive. Some of the other examples include shunning somebody out of an event, like a big wedding or a birthday party. Everybody but you happens to be invited. Like most recently, I had read a story online of a individual on the autism spectrum that goes to a small group, and they were talking about being excluded from a wedding that somebody in their small group had invited everybody but them. And that is a big example of passive-aggressive behavior. Or when I was in high school, I was excluded from riding to the prom with a group of kids who were supposed to be my friends. And they didn't really like me or want me with, so I got stuck going to the prom all by myself. So yeah, those are some great big examples of passive-aggressive behavior. And then another one that can be very demeaning or very hurtful is when you're getting sabotaged. And when I'm talking about sabotaging behavior, I'm referring to you being excluded from an email list or excluded from important emails at work because somebody in that office or somebody at your church or your organization hates your guts and they don't want you around. So what they do is they purposely refuse to put you in an email, and when you call them out about it, they drop little comments like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize you were left out, or how did that happen? So yeah, those are hints that they don't want you around or that they're not interested. Other ones that they can do sabotage-wise is passive-aggressive behavior can be a way to hurt somebody else. And let's say that they know, or the other person knows, that you've had a conflict with somebody else, and you and the other person are trying the best to patch things up and try to get along as two individuals. However, your friend or another individual will sabotage things by knowing that the other person has an interest or they can help on something. Like, let's say they have a broken lamp, or they can cut hair, or they can do whatever. but this form of sabotaging can come by distracting the other person and causing a bigger conflict to happen between the two people because the other individual is jealous. So, anyway, those are some examples of passive-aggressive behavior. And I admit, it took me a long time to really understand what passive-aggressive behavior is, and now that I know, I realize that it is an unwritten rule of society, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed to the Asperger community so that those of us who are on the spectrum will have an easier time picking it up. So, if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear from you. Please also be sure to check out my other videos, and if you like what you saw, be sure to subscribe. Until next time, I'm Miyah Sundermeyer.